down the CCP, take it down the CCP, take it down the CCP, 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 take it down the CCP, take it down the CCP, take it down the, take it down the, take it down the CCP, 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 take it down the CCP, take it down the CCP, take it down the, take it down the, take it down the CCP.
Take down the CCP, take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Let me tell you what I've been through, baby. Lived a life that was hella unfair. Seen things that been driving me crazy. In a country where the leaders don't care. Didn't think we had the courage to change it. Tore it down and they weren't prepared. Everything that they kept us from saying. Now we talking and they better be scared. Take from us. Tell us what and who to love. Swear I finally had enough. It's time to rise above. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. I said, take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me. Fuck the CCP.
Communism sucks, hard for me to give a fuck. Try to tell them and they try to keep it on the hush. Middle finger up, turn into a fist. They wanna keep the poor poor so they never rich. If you wanna see the future, look into the past. Been a century of silence, we gon' take it back. I'm just stating facts, tell you how it is. Ain't no way to change shit if we don't resist.
Take from us. Tell us what and who to love.
Economic warfare, you look at the CCP has essentially run the table on the left in the last 25 years. It really came in this textbook of unrestricted warfare. So it was the study of that, along with my knowledge of China, living in China and being around China, that very much shaped my point of view of how dangerous the Chinese Communist Party is to Chinese people, how dangerous they are to the United States, and how dangerous they are to all of humanity.
Okay, give us some examples of unrestricted warfare you have witnessed in and out of the U.S.
Remember, unrestricted warfare, the concept comes from submarine warfare, unrestricted submarine warfare in World War I and World War II, the things that sank the Lusitania, that really got the United States into World War I. Unrestricted warfare is a naval term that came from the ability of submarines to shoot innocent merchant craft or passenger liners. It was this brutal warfare that the fascists and the Germans in World War I and World War II thought, and the Japanese Navy thought would bring the West to its knees. So I've side the propaganda, particularly the propaganda that's out there. The principal propaganda is against Lao Beijing and the Chinese people. What the CCP says all the time is that the Chinese people are not ready for democracy, the Chinese people are not ready for the rule of law, the Chinese people are not ready for freedom, that they're too chaotic, they're too uneducated, and that if the CCP is not there with a very strong hand, that China will basically devolve back into warlordism, chaos, and civil war. So if you see unrestricted warfare, you see it in the West all the time, of how they essentially say and tell leaders in the West that they need a strong hand, they need a firewall, they need this kind of totalitarian police state to keep control of the Chinese people because they're not cultured enough to really handle their own affairs. Now, we know that's a lie, because you can look in old Hong Kong or in Taiwan or Australia, Canada, the United States, England, Western Europe, wherever the Chinese people have gotten out of the totalitarian dictatorship of the Chinese Communist Party, they've prospered. They are fabulous citizens. They're active participants in democracy. They understand the rule of law. They breathe the fresh air of freedom and thrive. And so we know that's a lie. But we've seen it on economic warfare throughout the West. We've seen it on everything that they're trying to do. Now we're seeing it with the PLA up in Chinese-occupied Tibet, on the Indian border, in the South China Sea, trying to cause trouble there. So you can see it everywhere. in the world if you have the eyes to see. Remember, most of the West is blind because the West, particularly the elites, the banking elites, the financial elites, the technology elites, the business elites, and many of our political elites like being in business with the Chinese Communist Party because as long as they keep the Chinese people as slaves, as long as they have the slave labor of China, right, to produce goods, it means more money for everybody.
So, what is your advice to U.S. governments to counteract the CCP's unrestricted warfare in order to win?
Well, right now, I think that it's very simple. If we cut the Chinese Communist Party off from capital and technology, we could bring, I think the Chinese Communist Party is actually a paper tiger. I think we could bring it to their knees very quickly. I agree with my brother, Miles Guo, who I think is one of the most brilliant strategists I've ever met. Miles has said forever that we have to confront them, and the place where to confront them is in Hong Kong, where they've essentially taken the freedom of the Hong Kong people. My introduction to China came as a young naval officer, and I think it was 1977, 1978, when my destroyer that was in the 7th Fleet pulled into Hong Kong, and I absolutely fell in love with the city. I fell in love with the people, and I really, from a boyhood dream to ever get to China, it was just the most incredible introduction ever. Just the greatest people and the most hardworking people, and just Hong Kong in those days was just fantastic. So we've seen in Hong Kong how the Chinese Communist Party has essentially taken the freedom of the Chinese people and had this brutal crackdown. And the reason they did it, they can't allow the rest of the world to see how the Chinese people thrive, where they have the rule of law, or where they have freedom, or where they have democracy. So both Taiwan and Hong Kong are absolute threats to the entire logic of the Chinese Communist Party. That's why they had to crack down. But I think I agree with Miles Guo. If we broke the convertibility of the Hong Kong dollar, if we choked them off from any access to US dollars, if we sanctioned their 5 big financial institutions, including Bank of China, CITIC, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, and Penang Group, if we sanctioned Wan Xishan personally and his family, we sanctioned Xi and his family, like we do the mullahs in Iran, we could bring the Chinese Communist Party, I think, to its knees in 60 or 90 days and really allow the freedom of the Chinese people. So it's totally within the control of the West to do it. To me, it's a moral outrage why the West is not doing it, why we're playing patty cake with them. It's time now to stand up to this dictatorship. I've said for a long time, Dr. Ming, that Hong Kong resembles Czechoslovakia in 1938. The West has to stand up to the Chinese Communist Party, and they have to do it in Hong Kong.
It is well known that the CCP has tried all means to interfere in the American presidential election. Why does the CCP do so? What is your advice to the American voters?
Well, my advice is very simple. The reason they're trying to intrude is they don't want Donald J. Trump to be reelected president of the United States. They realize President Trump's the only American president ever to take on the Chinese Communist Party and really bring them to heel. Joe Biden is essentially a business partner. He's totally compromised. The people around him are compromised. They were the people in charge during the Obama administration of the pivot to Asia. And President Xi came to the White House in a formal state visit and signed a document in the Rose Garden that talked about cybersecurity, cyber intrusions, and also the South China Sea. President Xi lied about everything. They never honored anything in that treaty. The South China Sea became more contentious. The cyber intrusions increased. President Xi is a stone cold liar. He cannot be trusted. He's a brutal dictator. He has brutalized Lao Beijing. He's brutalized the Chinese people. He is solely responsible for the release of the CCP virus that has killed so many hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world. He's a cold-blooded murderer. He's got to be held accountable. Joe Biden won't do that. Joe Biden's a business partner of his. Donald Trump, for all his rough edges, and I understand many people throughout the world are not fans of Donald Trump, but he's the first guy to stamp the CCP. That's why they're trying to basically intrude in the American election.
Now let's move to the second issue, populist movement versus exposure revolution. You are well-known populist. What has made you become a hardcore anti-CCP fighter? Where did it begin?
Well, it began many years ago with my living in China and actually getting to know the Chinese people and seeing the brutality and the totality of the dictatorship. you know, if you look around the world, if you know the Chinese, you see when they get to Hong Kong, you see when they get to Taiwan, or you see Singapore, Australia, the United States, Canada. The Chinese really thrive. It's totally different. You see they're cheerful, smiles on their face, and here's the reason: the Chinese people are hardworking, decent people, and when they have the opportunity to basically take care of their families and not have to worry about a totalitarian dictatorship, when they have the rule of law, when they have freedom of religion, when they have freedom of expression, when they have democracy, when they basically have the fundamental rights. And remember, in the West, because of our Declaration of Independence, these are natural rights. There's no government. One of the brilliance of our founders is that a government doesn't give you these rights. These rights come to you from God. They're inalienable rights. And the Chinese people have these inalienable rights. It comes from God. And if you see them throughout the rest of the world, where they actually have these endowed rights and can actually perform on it, you see a totally different group of people, and they've added so much to the world. They've added so much to the United States. So to me, that was the key thing.
How did you get to know Miles Guo, and what was your first impression of him as a person?
The revolution,
Miles Guo.
yes. Listen, I think that is one of the most important revolutions of the 21st century. This exposure revolution, I think, is absolutely brilliant, and it is something that's had a big impact on me. I think that when the story's written about how the Chinese people became free, I think the exposure revolution is going to be a very, very important part of that. So I honor all Chinese throughout the world that are trying to develop things like this. I honor the whistleblower movement. I'm standing in front of the flag of the new federal state of China. I'm very humbled and honored that I was asked by several people, including Miles Guo, to be one of the founders of that, because I think that this offers an alternative to the Chinese people. And what I mean by that, if you talk to many world leaders, they say, oh, the CCP, as bad as they are, needed because the Chinese people can't handle freedom. And I think if you look at the exposure revolution and other things that have happened, the whistleblower movement, the new federal state of China, you're seeing a new alternative presented to the world of how the Chinese people can govern themselves in the future.
What are the similarities and differences between populist movement and the exposure revolution? How do you compare them?
Well, I think they're actually combined in the way that, you know, I've said for a long time, the Lao Beijing old 100 names and the deplorables, old 100 names and the Trump deplorables are basically the same people. These are the people that are the hardworking, decent people that all of society's issues come down on their shoulders. Remember, they're the ones that build the schools. They're the ones that have the churches. They're the ones that really keep the community going. They have the strong civic understanding and keep the families going. So I've always said, I think China's ripe for populism. It's the reason Wang Xishan, when I went to Hong Kong in September of 2017, Wang Xishan asked to see me. And when I went up there and met with him, I think for a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours, all he was focused on was populism and economic nationalism. He didn't care about Donald Trump. He didn't care about any of these other issues. He wanted to know about populism because they are petrified of populism. And I just look at the exposure revolution as really people taking charge of their own lives, and the whistleblower movement and others to really take charge of their own lives. So I see them as very, very, very similar.
You mentioned that you joined Miles Guo to declare the founding of the new federal state of China on the 4th of June. Name 3 things on that day that were most memorable for you.
Listen, that day, I think, is going to live in the history of the Chinese people. I can tell you as an American, what was most amazing is what Miles Guo did. First off, I have never seen New York Harbor absolutely empty. Only the Lady May and Lady May 2 were there. And, you know, whatever Miles did, whoever he talked to really get the whole harbor around the Statue of Liberty to be basically vacant is, I've never seen that before in my life. And I've lived in New York on and off since 1984 when I came from Harvard. But it was stunning to me. The other thing was with the airspace. You know, you had the banners flying and the planes flying the banners of the flag of the new federal state. It was absolutely extraordinary. And the reason was, go back in time in June, New York was in a hard lockdown. So to have that kind of freedom showed you, I think, the level of detail Miles went to kind of commemorate, celebrate the founding of the new federal state, and to do it really on the 31st anniversary of Tiananmen Square. The other was just the emotion I had after Mr. Ha read the proclamation, the declaration, reading it next to Miles Guo on Lady May 2, reading it on that boat was really very moving to me. And the reason it was moving was the concepts and the words and the ideas that were in there. It really talked about what I've been honored and humbled to be a fighter for, and that's the Chinese people, the little guy. You know, the Chinese people are so decent, so hardworking, so peace-loving. It got very emotional for me to read that, and I'm so honored and thankful that Miles Guo and Mr. Ha allowed me to do that. But it was one of the I've been very fortunate and blessed by God to be able to do many things in my life, but that was probably one of the most important things I've ever done, and it was incredibly emotional for me to do that in front of the Statue of Liberty and to really talk about something that I think will absolutely help the Chinese people free themselves and bestow freedom on them for hundreds of years to come.
So after 4th June, you stayed on board the Lady May, our warship, for about a consecutive 70 days. Why did you stay there so long?
Very simple. Miles and I had so many things to work on. You know, we've since I met Miles after I left the White House, we actually work best when we're near each other, bouncing ideas off of each other. You know, I can't highlight to people how hardworking and creative Miles is. I consider myself a very hard worker. I've always prided myself in being able to work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, and do it for many months together. But when I was on the Lady May, Miles Guo actually works 20 hours every day, 7 days a week. And the reason is he has a purpose. His purpose is very focused, take down the CCP. And so I have become a colleague of his in that. I'm very honored to do that. It is really the focus of my life to take down the CCP. And here's the reason. People say, well, Bannon, why are you so focused on the Chinese? Why are you so focused on the CCP? That dictatorship is absolutely central to how bad, why the economy is so bad for working class people throughout the world. Because what the party of Davos and the city of London and Wall Street and all the global corporations, they're in business with the senior cadre of the Chinese Communist Party to enslave the Chinese people. As long as the Chinese people are enslaved, as long as they're being paid an absolute pittance for what their value of what their work is, as long as they don't have great housing and a good environment and great education and all that, as long as they're slaves, the wages in the rest of the world can't come up either. And so this plan is to enslave the Chinese people and essentially make Russian serfs out of everybody else. So the central heart of it, I tell people, I said, listen, if we're going to break this for all working class people and middle class people throughout the world, we've got to break the stranglehold of the Chinese Communist Party on their own people. It's the enslavement of the Chinese people that is the central issue of the first half of the 21st century. The Chinese people are going to free themselves. Steve Bannon is not going to do it. America is not going to do it. The West is not going to do it. The Chinese people are going to free themselves. The new federal state, the whistleblower movement, Miles Guo, they're going to free, in conjunction with Lao Beijing and people in China, in mainland China, they're going to free themselves. To the degree that Westerners like myself can help and assist, it makes sense not just because it's morally right for the Chinese people, but it's actually going to help the world. It's going to help the United States of America. It's going to help the deplorables. And so the central issue of our time is this bloodthirsty totalitarian dictatorship that is the Chinese Communist Party. If anybody could actually see, and this is one I'm so proud of, the whistleblower movement, the Rule of Law Society, the Rule of Law Foundation, we've been getting and assisting defectors to leave China, particularly about the Wuhan lab. And Dr. Yan is about to do a major expose this week to show that the CCP virus actually came from the Wuhan lab. It's not natural. It didn't come from a bat. It's man-made, man-enhanced by the Chinese Communist Party. As Miles Guo said several weeks ago, the CCP lied and Canadians died. The CCP lied and Chinese died. The CCP lied and Japanese died. The CCP lied and Americans died. And what Miles Guo said is the Chinese Communist Party is guilty of genocide here. They've killed now hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world. I believe they've killed millions inside of mainland China because they don't care. They don't care about the Chinese people. So this issue has to be brought to the head. The central issue of the first half of the 20th century is the freedom of all men and women in China and to throw off the yoke of this totalitarian, bloodthirsty dictatorship, the Chinese Communist Party.
Now let's move to the final issue, your indictment. Days before the 20th August, Miles Guo alerted his fellow warriors that certain CCP's manipulation was about to surface. Astonishingly, we found it turned out to be your child. Were you shocked?
No, I was not shocked. I think that the CCP and other actors have wanted to shut me up politically. This is just a political hit job. What they want me to do is not have an active role with helping President Trump be reelected and to stop me from my attacks, my constant attacks on the Chinese Communist Party. They're not going to shut me up. In fact, they've only empowered me. The support I've gotten since then has been overwhelming. I am going to be relentless. I'm actively working many hours a day on the reelection of President Trump. I'm working as a major coordinator for all of this activity that's going to take place after the vote. Your audience should understand on the evening of November 3rd, President Trump is going to be leading in the vote for President of the United States, but it's going to try to be stolen by these cultural Marxists, this Marxist insurrection that's backed by George Soros, backed by the Chinese Communist Party. They're going to try to take the election from President Trump, and I'm spending hours and hours and hours right now working as a nerve center with War Room to make sure that we're coordinated that that doesn't happen. So no, the War Room show, as I know we have many Chinese fans, the show is now 3 times bigger than it was before I was arrested. So no, they will not shut me. They will never shut me up. They will never, ever, ever get me to stop going after the Chinese Communist Party. This is the central purpose of my life, and I will do it until my last dying breath.
That's exactly what my school revealed, that from your indictment, the conspiracy by CCP prevents you from replaying the success victory in the election. It also means to people's attention from the indictment of Nickie Davis. Any comments?
Yes, 100%. Look at the Nickie Davis shows you the corruption in the American system and who's paying to get the Jolo freed of all charges in the United States, but principally Miles Guo. What's most shocking about the indictment is the efforts and the amount of money that Higginbotham, Elliott Brody, others were taking to get Miles Guo out of there. That's why I tell people that people say, oh, Miles Guo can't be trusted. Miles Guo's a liar. You know, the CCP says he's a rapist, everything like that. I said, look, just look how hard they're trying to do to get Miles Guo back to China. I said, if he didn't have a voice of freedom, if he was not telling the truth, they wouldn't care about him. The reason they care about getting Miles Guo back is very simple. That Miles Guo preaches the truth about the Chinese Communist Party, and they can't hide from it. So what they want to do is get him back to China, and then they want to kill him. Okay, it's pretty evident that Miles Guo is a major risk. And I tell people, listen, just look at what he said about H&A. Look at what he said about Hong Kong. And most importantly, look what he said about the CCP virus. Miles Guo said in late December of 2019 and early January, in the very building I'm standing in, because I was with him, that there was a major plague coming out of a pandemic and a plague coming out of China. He warned, remember, Miles Guo came to Washington, D.C. in 2017 and warned the American people that Pandora's box was going to be opened up by the Chinese Communist Party and spread throughout the world. So to me, he's a prophet. I have never seen him wrong on any major thing he's ever talked about. So no, I'm honored to be to work alongside Miles and just to be a small part of this movement, the whistleblower movement, your school, the new federal state, all of it that's working to free the Chinese people from this totalitarian, bloodthirsty dictatorship.
Yeah, I'd like to remind you some detail here, also to our audience. Within 20 minutes of your detainment, all main propaganda in China did as their headline, even before the American mainstream media. What is your thought?
I thought they were tipped. Obviously, they were tipped off. But more importantly, Global Times, People's Daily, CCTV, they should understand something. I'm stronger now than I've ever been. I've had more people rally to me that understand this is a political hit job. So listen, I am not going away. In fact, I'm a worse enemy of the Chinese Communist Party today than I was on August 19th. And if they don't think that I'm going to put every available piece of energy into destroying the CCP, they're absolutely wrong. The Chinese people are a good and decent people. They deserve their freedom. Their inalienable rights come from God, just like the rights of Americans, just like rights of people in the United Kingdom and Western Europe. The Chinese people deserve to be free. They do not deserve to live under the boot of a radical, bloodthirsty, atheistic, materialistic dictatorship, someone that would do what they did in the Wuhan lab and basically exacerbate it, make sure it went all over the world. They don't care about the Chinese people. They don't care about the American people. They don't care about mankind. They're an enemy to mankind. They're an enemy against humanity, and they have to be dealt with. And it's every waking second of the day, I'm focused on how to take down the Chinese Communist Party.
Some Miles Guo's fellow warriors voluntarily gathered outside the court, waving the flags of the National Federal State of China to show their solidarity with you. Bill.
I got to tell you, I want to thank everybody who's out there. It was one of the most moving experiences of my life. Look, I wasn't kowtowed at all on the arrest. I pulled the mask off and went to face the media because I was in fighting mode, as I'm still in fighting mode today. But to see that beautiful blue flag of the new federal state and to see these incredibly decent people the way that they're all day waving the flag, I wanted to spend more time with them, but the security guards got me into the vehicle. All I can say is thank you. And you can't imagine how powerful it is to see that flag. You know, from June 4th when it first came out all the way up until today, to me it's been a beautiful flag. It represents a new birth of freedom for the Chinese people. It represents a new China. And I can tell the whole world, if you see these tough warriors, these warriors that would stay there all day and be there to greet me and make sure I had support, and the overwhelming and outpouring of support from members of the new federal state, from the members of the whistleblower movement, from the members that are associated with Miles Guo, and people associated with your school and others, it's really humbled me. And remember, I'm just a very small part of this. The Chinese people will eventually fight and get their own freedom. I'm just a small part of assisting because I think so highly of the Chinese people. I think so highly of Lao Beijing because in the United States, I came from Lao Beijing. My family's a very small working class family. My dad will turn 99 next week. And, I love him and I love my mom, my whole family. And so they remind me of Lao Beijing. And that's one of the reasons I fight so hard and one of the reasons I'm so honored to have the support that I have in China.
Since your indictment, Guo and his fellow warriors, including me, have been distanced by some well-known anti-CCP public figures in the West, they even experienced the verbal abuse. Have you any idea why? And what is your advice?
Well, the advice would be very simple. Who's really anti-CCP, right? What I find is anti-CCP is the new federal state, the whistleblower movement, your school, and others. Those are people who are prepared to take to the streets. Those are people who are prepared to protest. They're prepared to put on the line. My question to these people that supposedly such hawks, where were they when I first started the American version of this? You know, a lot of people that say they're anti-China hawks to me are just people trying to make money. They realize now that we've shifted the conversation to be the freedom of the Chinese people, and they see the way to get on TV, they see the way to write articles, they see a way to make money writing books, to giving speeches. But I think this is a determinant factor of who are really the warriors, who's doing the work, who's there every day. You know, these are a lot of the people that mock Miles Guo and say, oh, he's just a businessman, he just wants to get his money. You look at the work that Miles Guo's done. You look at the sacrifice of Miles Guo. It's kind of like the sacrifice of Donald Trump. Donald Trump didn't have to run for president. Every day of his life since then has been a tough day as they come after him relentlessly and they try to destroy him. Remember, they don't want to defeat Donald Trump. They just don't want to defeat Miles Guo, and they just don't want to defeat Steve Bannon. What they want to do is destroy Trump, destroy Guo, and destroy Steve Bannon as an example to anybody else that would ever stand up and support Lao Beijing or support the deplorables, that if you ever try to give these people a voice, if you ever try to work in their defense, if you ever try to make life better for them, you will be destroyed. So I think that that is the game we're playing now, and I don't intend to ever back down.
Yeah, indeed. My impression, though, the warfare, happens in various scales, in various forms, but there's one dimension that is easily to be overlooked, which is that it targets on individuals, especially in terms of lawfare and mediafare. Take the example of Miles Guo. He has been treated by now 6 lawsuits. He has been portrayed by the CCP and its collaborators as a fraudster. a rapist, a double agent, now a warlike lunatic. The truth behind all this, as proven by the Nickie Davis indictment, is that Miles Guo is simply the most dangerous man to the CCP in history. And that's why you have a tester here, right? If you have thrown any trouble, that means you've done enough. You haven't made enough in the CCP. So congratulations, Bannon. You have one here. Be proud of yourself. Yeah? That's why Miles Guo and his fellow warriors love you, admire you. We regard you as our hero, our friend, and ally. And we will stand in solidarity. We will carry on this fight. We will win unrestricted warfare, and we'll take down the city. So, are there any other? Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Ming, I'd just like to say I'm very honored and humbled by all the support. Look, I'm a small part of this. And the reason I do it, I love the Chinese people. I love Lao Beijing. Your fight is my fight, and your fight's America's fight. Remember, there's so many, many people that have your back and have your support. There's one thing I will tell you that's inevitable. The Chinese Communist Party is going to be destroyed. It's going to be destroyed by the Chinese people. And when the Chinese people are finally able to really encapsulate and take hold of their inalienable rights, those rights that come from God, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, rule of law, democracy, it's going to change the world. It's going to change the world to a better place. So the sunlit uplands are in front of us. We've got a lot of tough ground to cover before then. We actually, in our righteousness, have to go to war with the Chinese Communist Party. I know we're at war with them right now, but this is a war that we have to win. There's no middle ground here. If the Chinese Communist Party wins, it'll lead to the destruction of mankind and to this planet. If Lao Beijing, the new federal state, the whistleblower movement, your school, Miles Guo, and others win, then we're going to have peace and prosperity. So this is a fight worth having.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Bannon. It's such a great pleasure to listen. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ming. Thank you.
Thank you. I also like to extend thanks to ZAR for making arrangements and the coordination, and also thank Davis for arranging technical issues. I'd like to thank David, my son, also all the fellow warriors of Himalaya UK. Thank you so much for your generous support. And you're very kind, so proud. Yeah, we are a great team. And the last, please, thanks to the audience. Please feel free to leave feedback on the YouTube, our channels. Hope to see you soon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Dr. Ming.
Thank you.
How was that, guys? Is that okay?
Get to me because it killed our families. Fuck the CCP.
这是你我维护正义的必须，这是你我维护正义的必须。Take down CCP.
Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. I said, hey, down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families. Fuck the CCP.
你完了，共产党！你完了，共产党！你完了，共产党！你完了。